In the months following the 2022 invasion, the international community levied more than 6,400 individual financial, technological, and energy restrictions against Russia. Despite this massive coordinated effort, Russia reported that its economy actually grew. It expanded by 3.6% in 2023 and 4.3% in 2024. To survive the blockade from the West, Moscow executed a rapid logistical pivot, redirecting the vast majority of its export trade toward Asian markets. At the same time, the state assembled a massive maritime shadow fleet. This allowed them to bypass the G7's oil price caps and keep fossil fuel revenues flowing. While the headline growth appears strong, the central bank is reacting as if the economy is in a state of emergency. This chart shows inflation alongside the central bank's policy rate. Notice the interest rate spike to a punishing 21%. Looking down at private sector credit, you see the immediate result, a steep drop-off in new lending. Because of this tightening, official economic ministries now project that headline growth will stall out, dropping to around 1%. That 21% interest rate indicates a system running dangerously hot. Russia's headline GDP figures are masking a severe structural crisis, a phenomenon economists call a positive output gap. A positive output gap happens when the demand for goods vastly outpaces a country's physical ability to supply them. In Russia's case, this demand is not organic consumer growth. It is a massive, state-funded fiscal stimulus. To sustain the conflict in Ukraine, the Russian government effectively doubled its defense spending. The military budget now consumes between 7 and 10% of the nation's entire gross domestic product. They funded this cash injection by draining their sovereign wealth reserves. Since 2022, the liquid assets in Russia's National Wealth Fund have plummeted from $116 billion down to roughly $53 billion. While the state floods the economy with cash, the supply side is hitting a brick wall. Those 6,400 global sanctions successfully severed Russia's access to critical Western machinery, replacement parts, and high-tech components. Compounding this equipment shortage is a severe demographic crisis. The state is mobilizing approximately 30,000 men every month for the war effort. Add in the estimated 1.5 million citizens lost to casualties and emigration, and the civilian labor pool is rapidly evaporating. A nation cannot print labor, and it cannot indefinitely bypass physical shortages of technology. The flood of government cash has pushed the Russian economy to its absolute physical limits. We can see the exact mathematical point where infinite government demand collides with constrained physical supply. It happens at 77.9% industrial capacity utilization. At this level, factories are running as hot as they can, and there is no room left to expand. This collision forces a structural divergence. To keep the war machine fed, the state must actively siphon capital, labor, and resources away from the civilian half of the economy and transfer them directly to the military sector. The results of this forced transfer are stark. Production lines for military vehicles and weaponry have surged by 29%. But look at what happens to the civilian sector in response. Cement production has dropped by 10%, and civilian car manufacturing has plummeted. When the government pumps billions of rubles into the economy, but factories are only producing tanks instead of consumer goods, the result is severe inflation. There is simply too much cash chasing too few civilian products. Building a tank requires massive amounts of raw materials and paid labor, which boosts the headline GDP. But when that tank is immediately destroyed on a battlefield, it adds nothing to the actual wealth of the nation. It just hollows out civilian purchasing power. The engine driving this system is finally beginning to stall. While Russia successfully pivoted its trade to Asia, the massive logistical costs of those longer, more complex supply chains are now eating directly into corporate profits. The technocrats inside Russia's institutions are now trapped. They are forced to balance the unrelenting financial demands of the war effort against a deteriorating macroeconomic reality. This creates an impossible dilemma for the central bank leadership. To prevent the economy from spiraling into hyperinflation, they have no choice but to maintain those suffocatingly high interest rates. But holding rates at 21% creates a dual fallout. It kills off any remaining civilian business investment, and it simultaneously spikes the cost for the government to service its own rapidly growing national debt. This strategy of structural attrition targets the physical foundations of the economy. By degrading energy revenues, technological access, and fiscal stability over years of conflict, the long-term cost of aggression becomes unsustainable. Russia is simply too large and too rich in natural resources to suffer an overnight economic collapse. The sheer mass of the country acts as a buffer against sudden shocks. Yet, short-term survival does not erase the long-term mathematical reality. Draining sovereign reserves to mask a severe labor shortage and structural rot is a strategy with a definitive expiration date. The ultimate question for the Russian economy is no longer if it will face a severe reckoning. It is exactly how long it can endure this slow, mathematical pressure before its productive capacity finally collapses.